Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. As we continue these 2 weeks of looking at things Jesus said after the resurrection, we come today to a story you probably know better than most, or at least that's what you have thought. Today we will consider the story of Doubting Thomas. Let me quickly remind you that when Jesus appeared to the disciples on the evening of Easter Day, Thomas wasn't there. No explanation is given for Thomas's absence. Perhaps he was at a family reunion, or maybe he was with a sick friend, or perhaps he had an important business matter to attend to. We don't know. What we do know is that Thomas said that unless he touched the wounds of Jesus, he would not believe. And right about there, we shake our heads and wag our fingers at him and accuse, "You doubter." Well, I wish we all had that kind of doubt. You see, there's a lot more going on than we realize. Thomas is mentioned in 3 or 4 stories in the Bible, and often it is Thomas who comes off as a practical man who tells it like it is. When Jesus says his disciples know where he is going, Thomas is the one who says, "Lord, we don't know, so how can we know the way?" Jesus answered that he was the way, the truth, and the life. Or another time when Lazarus had died and Jesus wanted to go there, all the disciples knew that Lazarus lived in Bethany, just a couple of miles from Jerusalem, where the religious leaders were seeking to kill Jesus. It is Thomas, full of faith, not doubt, who says, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Now, before we go any further, I need to mention how important it is that Thomas be present for the appearances of Jesus. You see, Thomas had a nickname. He was called Thomas the Twin. Many have speculated that Thomas bore an uncanny physical resemblance to Jesus, and so he was called the Twin. Some speculate that that was why Judas had to identify Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. An outsider might not be able to tell Jesus and Thomas apart, but Judas could. With Judas's help, they could arrest the right man. So if Thomas looked like Jesus, and Jesus appeared, but Thomas wasn't there, people could have said, "Oh, that was just Thomas. Jesus didn't rise. This is all a charade." When Thomas does hear about Jesus appearing to them, he makes his famous statement about not believing unless he touches Jesus' wounds from the crucifixion. And once again, we think doubter, when the truth is much more complex. You see, in that statement, Thomas is being the same old Thomas who tells it like it is. If Thomas was going to believe, he wanted the whole thing. In these words, Thomas was refusing to believe in anything less than a full bodily resurrection like Jesus had promised. He wasn't going to believe in a ghost or a spirit because that wasn't the promise. He wasn't going to be part of any kind of mass hysteria that pretended to see something that wasn't real. No, Thomas wanted the whole hog. Jesus fully, bodily risen, or nothing. So I would submit to you that that's not doubt the way we usually think about it. And instead, Thomas's view required a very astute and deep faith. I want to believe, but I'll only believe it if it is real. And frankly, it is because of Thomas that we can believe. It is because of Thomas that we can show the bodily resurrection of Jesus. It is because of Thomas that we can believe in our own bodily resurrection. The next week, Jesus appears to them again, and this time Thomas is with them. Jesus offers for him to touch his wounds, but Thomas never does. He has no doubt that this is really a risen Jesus in the flesh. That's when Jesus says the line we all know, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." It's not meant to be a rebuke of Thomas. As I've tried to show you, Thomas wasn't doubting the way we first thought, and instead was seeking the full and complete promise of Jesus come true. Rather, Jesus was giving us a statement of comfort for the early church and for us as well. You see, it would have been all too easy for those who had lived in the time of Jesus, who had seen Jesus, and who had spent time with Jesus, to think of themselves as better than thou believers. Those second-generation Christians didn't have that opportunity, and Jesus' words to the disciples that day validate the faith of those who have not seen just as much as those who have. Seeing Jesus in the flesh was not a prerequisite for faith. Jesus fully rose, and full belief is not limited to those first-generation Christians. Full faith is given to us all. As one commentator said, the joy of the first disciples at the sight of the risen Lord is explicitly stated. The blessing includes future generations in that joy. That joy is yours. Blessed are you. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.